Ladies and gentlemen, we are live. Thank you for tuning in, whether you're watching live or watching this back. I do appreciate it very much. Checking in, popping in. Oh, got the stream open on the side. Got to get situated. But yeah, we are a day away from GameStop's earnings. It's crazy how, for me, I feel like, I don't know if anyone else has the same situation. Anytime GameStop's about to come out with earnings, life and work and everything else just finds a way to get so busy at that given point in time. But here we are. Gonna do a quick preview stream. Got the hockey game on tonight, Stanley Cup final. Those of you that know me know, I'm pumped for the game. Got the new vegetation started. Just planted some more seeds. Just picked some basil from the plants I was growing. First time actually like harvesting something. It was literally so good. I made it into eggs this past weekend. So good. But follow along my journey. Continue to become Farmer Tetron. But no, in all seriousness, we're here to talk GameStop, and that's just a little bit where I'm at as of late. And just to let everyone know out there, I will be live tomorrow, starting at 3:30 Eastern. I'm going to go through earnings, cover everything live upon release, and just keep rocking and rolling as long as I can. So with that being said, I've already kind of previewed the earnings a little bit, and to be honest, with this particular quarter coming up, I feel like there's so many wild cards or just different moving parts as to what's going on, from the sale of the Canadian operations to the acquisition of Bitcoin, the convertible note offering. We'll see all of that show up in this report. So there's a lot of, different factors to look for here, and just little pieces of information and numbers that are going to affect the report as a whole. So I'm honestly having a hard time setting like a true predictive EPS, because I've been trying to just make my own EPS prediction each quarter and revenue prediction. Analysts do it, so why can't I? And I suggest everyone else do the same. I think it's a good habit to get into. Kind of helps you stay in touch with the company. But really, I think we have to partly look at the annual report, right? See what like the most recent numbers were, but then also partly look at like this quarterly report last year, right? So it's probably easier to do it like this. So we will pull up fourth quarter results, full newsroom 2024, and then go back to what Q1's results were, right? So Q1 results last year came out on June 7th, June 10th this year, so it's always around the same time, right? This same quarter last year, they lost $32.3 million. That was versus a loss of $50.5 million the year prior. And at this point, the cash hadn't hit the balance sheet. They were just going through those capital raises, or they were in the midst of them rather, those 3 share offerings. And net sales were $882 million roughly, comparison to 1.2, which to no one's surprise, I think we should all expect, top line revenue will decline in this coming quarter. It's just a matter of how much. I'm hopeful that it's not as bad as anticipated. I don't want to say as bad, but as much of a decrease as anticipated by analysts. So we can pull up the analyst estimates here. And by the way, Bitcoin, 110,000. So that's another factor I'll be looking for. And I honestly hope they bought more Bitcoin. I'll kind of get into that a little bit down the line here. But I do think it's possible. I think it's absolutely possible. We get the report and it's like, they actually doubled their Bitcoin position size, right? So we'll look at what the analysts got here. Although there's only 2 of them covering it, so I take it with like a grain of salt, but just a reference point, right? So the average estimate is $754 million for revenue, which would be a decline of about 14%. Yeah, I mean, that sounds about right. So you have to kind of look at the store count, but also the other side of it is PSA grading and just more collectibles, right? Little things like they started doing CandyCon and their own in-house brands. I'd like to see them do more of that, to be honest with you. I like that they've been doing a little bit at a time, but I think just keep expanding CandyCon. Try and make other controllers, right, for Xbox, PlayStation. That might be a little bit tougher market to crack into. And also the good part about the Switch controllers, like for someone like myself, I don't even have a Switch right now, but I have the controller because it works for the PC, and I've played on friends' Switches. I'm like, we need an extra remote. I got one, don't worry, right? So that's why I kind of got one. And of course, I want to support my favorite company. So why not? But we also did Mod Retro, the Raptor 8, right? So these are some of the little things. And then obviously PSA was the big move, and the collaboration was starting October 15th. So really it started playing into quarter 4. That was the very tail end of Q3. So we saw it play in the quarter 4, and definitely Q1, was the next big portion of what am I saying? Not even big portion, but the next quarter in which PSA became part of what they're doing, in the sense that once we get this report, it'll be about 6 months of reported data that includes PSA sales and grading. So just something to keep in mind, although I'm not expecting them to specify the PSA numbers, as we haven't seen that yet. Although I think it'd be a nice thing to see one day, how that's specifically lining up and how it's specifically affecting the business. But overall, I feel like the market really just cares. When I say the market, just how it's trading, the average like institutional investor, however you want to look at it, really just cares the most about what Bitcoin does, to be honest with you. That's really my gut feeling right now. So the first announced purchase of Bitcoin was May 28th, which, by the way, we're going to find out the cost basis in this upcoming report. So I'll definitely be looking forward to seeing what that is. And something I was kind of pointing out the last stream is, you notice they changed it where all this information used to be under the business strategy. Now the investment policy kind of contains all this information. So it really shows me that they're primarily focused on the business strategy, which contains the investment policy. So they really just simplified the business strategy to using cash and liquidity to maximize shareholder value, including through potential or acquisition opportunities and retail profitability. And then also the investment policy cites Bitcoin and potential other acquisitions, right? So while I'm not expecting an acquisition to be reported this particular quarter, I think it's always a possibility. And a lot of people say, oh, GameStop, haven't done anything, they haven't acquired anything, they've been waiting all this time. But why rush into an opportunity, especially when you could borrow money at a 0% rate and then also buy Bitcoin with that at the same time? So if you're like, oh, well, they're losing purchasing power over time by just holding cash. Not exactly, because they're earning interest for the time being until they see the best fit for that cash. And they can hold Bitcoin to essentially hedge against that. Because ultimately, to me, the thesis surrounding Bitcoin is the fact that the US dollar is endlessly created. The big, grand, fantastic, beautiful, whatever bill that's coming out, it's only going to add to the deficit, right? And then guess what? Whoever the next president is, whether they're on the left or the right, they're going to add to the deficit too, to some extent. That's just always how it goes, right? And we're in this debt spiral that, unfortunately, I really don't think there's a way out. Not to be too dramatic, and I don't think it's something that just plays out overnight. I think this happens over the next couple of decades, where it's honestly recognized that we really actually need Bitcoin as a world reserve currency, because no one can go out there and create it. But having said all that, my thought on this upcoming report is, it almost doesn't matter, as crazy as this sounds, right? Of course it matters, so don't hear me out here, what the numbers are. Because I feel like the market is strictly looking for, did they buy more Bitcoin? So I feel like if they report buying more Bitcoin, or they show that they acquired more Bitcoin than the initial purchase filing that we got just a few weeks ago at the Bitcoin conference, then the market will like it and the stock will go up. Even if the SG&A was higher than expected, margins weren't as strong as expected, EPS was negative, right? Which, by the way, I'm expecting EPS to be positive. They should get a one-time gain from the sale of the Canadian operations. To what extent, I'm really not too sure. I've had a hard time estimating on that. It's really hard to say. So I'm going to kind of just say wait and see on that one. But SG&A, I really think they got to keep that number below 30%. It was a little bit disappointing seeing it go up year over year from 23 to 24. But the overall number for SG&A is trending down. So I hope we continue to see that. Maybe we see about 270 million. That's what I'm kind of guesstimating here. Margins, I like to see closer to 30% for gross operating. Maybe we get like a negative 1% margin. I have a hard time seeing them being operationally profitable for Q1, but I think in Q2 or Q3 we could see that operation margin flip to a positive. And ultimately they do need to get there, because as of last year and the year prior, those quarters were ultimately profitable on the bottom line because of the interest income. And now they have significantly more interest income coming in this quarter as a result of raising capital through the convertible note offering, and also they raised capital around this time last year by selling shares. So most of the net margin, right, was really coming in later in the year, the improvement, and you could see how it really impacted them, right? And obviously Q4 is always stronger. So maybe on the top line, we look for something like 775 million, right, roughly. And then earnings on the bottom line, net income, maybe 30 million, right? Guesstimating here, which I think that's an EPS of about 6 or 7 cents. So overall, again, I think doesn't matter how good or bad the EPS is. I feel like it's all going to come down to, did they acquire Bitcoin? Did they acquire additional Bitcoin or did they not? And to be clear, I'm not saying they should or shouldn't. I think that's how the market's going to react to it. So while I hope I'm wrong, right, I'd be delighted if the stock price went up and they didn't buy more Bitcoin and it was a result of really strong numbers. But I just feel like the market in general, right, stock market right now, there's all these Bitcoin treasury companies popping up. And I don't think GameStop's exactly going that route, but I think the market's treating it as such. So if they don't show they bought more Bitcoin, all the headlines you're going to see, and they could have great EPS, right? Say they blow it out of the water. They have 800 million in revenue, better than expected. EPS on the bottom line comes out to be like 60 million. What's that, like 16 cents per share, right? Roughly estimating here. But then, oh, well, they didn't buy Bitcoin, right? They didn't buy Bitcoin. And then the headlines will be, oh, GameStop not acting on its investment policy continues to leave investors questioning because they didn't buy more Bitcoin, right? And that'll be all the nonsense headlines, and it'll disregard all the numbers. But then on the flip side, I feel like if they miss, right, revenue's only 700 million, 695, something like that, they'd have another loss of negative 30 million, which would be, not the most ideal, but not the end of the world. But then they'd be like, oh, they bought more Bitcoin, right? So it just kind of feels like where we're at right now, and I feel like that's kind of dictating the short-term price action and kind of why we saw it move up this afternoon after Bitcoin started moving up. And again, I'm not saying they should do this, they should do that. That's just kind of my feeling of where things are at right now in terms of just how the market's trading and perceiving any company acquiring Bitcoin. But I think it'll continue to be increasingly a thing where companies acquire Bitcoin on their balance sheet to hedge against currencies just being endlessly created over a long period of time. And they won't all become Bitcoin treasury companies. I think long term, 10, 20 years out, you see all major companies hold some Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Again, that's just a guy on the internet's opinion, that guy being me. But let's hit the chat real quick, see who's talking. What's up, Tetron? Scott, hope you're doing well. The man, the myth, the legend, Tetron. The future's looking so bright. Turner, what's up, my guy? I hope you're doing well. Yeah, like I said, whatever happens this report, I'm just excited to see the new numbers. That's honestly what I'm most excited about. See what's going on with Bitcoin. See what's going on with the bottom line. What's the store count looking like? Any potential information on PSA, right? Anything unforeseen, right? That is always maybe an X factor that we don't know is exactly coming. And then boom, it's on the report. And in general with GameStop, it's always exciting just to get new numbers to analyze. And I'll be able to update all my charts over here that I was just showing you guys. So I'm going to have to fix them up a little bit. Probably have to drop out 2022 here and just slide everything over. Same with this, drop 2020, drop 2020, maybe even 2021. Just make it a little bit cleaner and separated. And also I'm really curious, what does it look like selling off the Canadian operations? Is there some kind of one-time gain on that? I don't know. Guys, do you know exact time when earning call starts? I know it's after market, not exact time. Don't want to mess. Anton in the Netherlands, thanks for being here. So there is very likely not going to be an earnings call. GameStop's chose for the past couple of years to go with the approach of don't believe us, just watch. You're going to have to just believe in us if you want to invest. Otherwise, it might not be for you because we're not going to telegraph our plans or really go into details on an earnings call. And while I understand, it's a bit of a taboo approach, but they've really just made it clear of believe in us, or you don't have to be a part of this. That's to me the message they send by not doing an earnings call. And I honestly don't expect one this quarter coming up. I think there's some different stuff going on. Maybe in the future there's an earnings call. But I think as of now, they're just marching to the beat of their own drum. And they're like, all right, we're just going to report numbers. It is what it is. We'll put everything in the report, disclose everything, and that's that. But one other thing I want to mention that I'm going to dig into more as we, wrap up the earnings week here. It's always a busy week when it's GameStop earnings coming out. And I swear, each quarter that comes by, I just feel more and more zen. And I'm more like, okay, let the numbers be this, let the numbers be that. Let the stock move one way or another. And it is what it is either way. That's generally how I look at it. But I've been trying to research this a little bit. When I say research, I've just scratched the surface. I got to dig into it more. So there's a new accounting rule going into effect this quarter. If I'm not mistaken, GameStop will be impacted by this quarter. If not, it would be next quarter. It's called FASB ASU 2023-08. And essentially, right, I was grokking it just to start. You should never just blindly grok things. You could start with it. And I was reading this guy's stuff. Adam Livingston, I just found him. He's upbeat Bitcoin guy talking about the Bitcoin treasury companies. pretty interesting stuff he's got to say. I'm not saying I agree with everything, but essentially, they raised. Oh, this is a different thing I was just looking up. But effect and transition. So it's effective for all entities, public, private, not-for-profit, employee benefit, fiscal years beginning after December 15, 2024. Okay, so yes, it will be in this report, right? So this is something we're going to have to look for. And essentially, if a company holds, just go to the example, it makes the most sense. And again, I got to dig into this further, but it's just something to kind of keep in mind because it's going to start to impact the bottom line for GameStop and any company owning Bitcoin. If a company holds 100 Bitcoin units with a cost basis of $2 million and a fair value of $3 million at the start of the adoption period, January 1st, 2025, it would record a $1 million cumulative effect adjustment to increased retained earning going forwards, and any changes to Bitcoin fair value would be recorded in net income each reporting period, right? So let's pull this up here. Sure. And this is on Deloitte, so it's a good source. I'm glad I found something to keep it open. Wrap tokens, blah, blah, digital assets. But this is very impactful because it really is going to affect how every company reports earnings that has Bitcoin. And in a way, I think it's great for the adoption of Bitcoin just by more companies and just being more validated in the financial world. I think we've already started to see that through Bitcoin ETFs, institutions like JP Morgan allowing you to acquire Bitcoin, right, for institutional investors. For a long time, Jamie Dimon was like, oh, Bitcoin's a scam. Meanwhile, like, they're stacking it, but anyways. So with all that type of stuff happening, this is just another step in the right direction where we need like a framework so Bitcoin can be accepted in the financial world, even for people who don't necessarily agree with it, want anything to do with it, but there's accounting practices in play where, things could be accounted for accordingly, and also just general relevance. Like, I feel like it needs this valid information to kind of be, not valid information, but there needs to be framework, rules, and regulations, and just clear guidance for companies and individuals to continue to want to adapt Bitcoin and have it as an asset on their balance sheet in the case such as GameStop's. Because also, it's one of those where every day it seems like there's a new company acquiring Bitcoin. I saw it today, I think it was. There's like this new Japanese company, small company, relatively small, that acquired some Bitcoin. And I think we'll see this a lot with Japanese companies. And I think what is a big one that's been doing a lot? Metaplanet. They basically said, we're going to become a Bitcoin treasury company. But I feel like a lot of Japanese companies will specifically hold Bitcoin, mostly because their currency is losing purchasing power faster than the dollar, right? When you zoom out, their purchasing power has continued to go down, and that's really as a result of their debt to GDP being like 250%, 260%, whatever it is right now. And we're on that same path, right? We're on that same path in the United States, unless something dramatic changes, which, even when Doge was becoming a thing, right? Department of Government Efficiency, I still honestly thought, like, it doesn't matter how much they cut, how effective it is, like, unless we just stop running a deficit right now and try to aggressively pay back our debt, the US dollar is always going to be printed. I always say to people, it doesn't matter who the president is, who's in Congress, who's in what office. The United States of America always prints more money as time rolls on. So that's the direction we're moving in. I think it's one of those you got to kind of just adopt the best you can. But also, the thing that's bullish to me, this is a one week candle chart, just continuing the trend up, right? Even if we get a little drop off here, so be it. We seem to still be in a general uptrend since around this time last year. And again, I'll say the same thing I've continued to say. If you told anyone back here in April 2024, hey, fast forward 14 months, GameStop's going to issue shares 3 times and a convertible note, which is capital raised through issuing debt that can be converted to shares at a 0% rate. And guess what? Stock price is going to be 3 times higher, right? It's going to be triple, so 200% higher, from $10 to $30. You would have said, you're crazy. How did that happen? What? And yet, here we are, right? And that's part of what makes the GameStop story so remarkable. I've never seen a company do something similar to that. Bought ACI that people buy food at 2,200 stores and ALLR Clove both had bad news. Okay, and buy and see Fidelity both opportunities on these 2 companies. Okay, Michael Anthony, thanks for being here. Throwing a lot of different stocks out there. Maybe those are worth trading. What was the big one? You kind of made me think of what's Circle Internet Group. So this is the company that is basically created a US dollar coin. So I've read into it a little bit just out of curiosity. So Circle is really interesting, right? Because basically what they're doing is just issuing US dollar coin, but they make sure to always back it with money market accounts and US treasuries. Allegedly, right? Not suggesting that they're not doing that, but also there's a lot of situations we've seen over the years in crypto and Bitcoin where even that seemed the most legit and they weren't doing what we exactly thought they were doing. Although, given that they're going public, I think that's a good thing, right? I think that incentivizes them to continue to follow the rules because there's a lot of eyes on it now. But one thing to keep in mind is 99% of the revenue is literally from just interest on treasuries, and they're earning literally millions and billions of dollars just from interest. So if the Fed cuts rates even by 1%, right, over the next year, their revenue will essentially decline 25% year over year. So just an interesting situation going on with Circle, but yet another cryptocurrency related company going public, and just again continued relevance in the general industry. Not going to touch this one, to be honest with you. It's one of those if you traded it these past couple days, I'm sure you could have made a quick buck. Maybe you still can. I'm not sure. Those of you that know me know I'm really not a short-term trader, but just a little interesting situation going on there, and kind of relatively ties into Bitcoin and just part of what GameStop's getting into. But overall, guys, I'm really just excited for the upcoming earnings report. And that's tomorrow. So we're getting real close. We're literally counting down the hours. We're less than 24 hours away. And for me, I really want to see them buy more Bitcoin, to be honest with you. And I kind of am starting to convince myself that they did. And again, it's not the end of the world if they didn't. I feel like they're easing into it. But I feel like you still have $1 billion available from the convertible note offering, roughly, that you can utilize. So why not use it, right? Not all of it at once, maybe just use another 200, 300, 400 million into Bitcoin and maybe double your position, because you just see more and more companies acquiring Bitcoin. MicroStrategy continues to acquire Bitcoin. You see some small countries posting about or discussing the idea of holding Bitcoin as a reserve asset to basically hold value of their currency, or strengthen the country's balance sheet. We're talking much smaller countries. So I just feel like there's more and more demand going into it. However, it's worth noting in a stock market crash or just any bear market in Bitcoin, that can happen at any point in time, right? Nobody truly knows. It's still a volatile asset. So I also understand the idea of not going too crazy. But also, if you have a long-term viewpoint, as I believe GameStop does, then why worry too much about the exact price you're getting in, right? Some people are saying, oh, look, oh, wow, are we literally at a new all-time high right now? No, we're getting real close. Sorry, I thought it just touched it. But look, it just broke 110,000 a couple hours ago. But if you have a long-term viewpoint anyway, why worry too much about when you're getting in, right? Because people see this chart and they go, oh, they're buying the top. They're buying the top. But you have to realize with Bitcoin, the thing that makes me the most bullish is it really comes down to supply of dollars versus supply of Bitcoin. The supply of dollars is just up, 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 up. And you need to keep issuing new debt to pay down old debt. So you're kind of going down this slippery slope, right? A debt spiral that you really can't get out of unless you start having a surplus instead of a deficit. And ultimately, there's not always going to be foreign demand or companies that have enough money to just buy all the bonds that the government's issuing. So what happens then? Eventually, the Fed buys the bonds. And if the Fed's buying it, how are they getting the money to buy it? They're creating it. They're printing it, right? So the US dollar supply continues to go up as the amount of total debt goes up. Meanwhile, when you look at Bitcoin's supply chart, it's actually a reverse exponential. So in the beginning, in the very, very early stages, right? Way back here, even if it's not on the chart here, the rate of creation was very quick. And then every time Bitcoin halves, the rate of creation is cut in half. So if there was being prior to this past halving, right, that we had last year, if there was, just using random numbers, this is not what it was, 400 Bitcoins a day being created, then the halving came, boom, now only 200 Bitcoins per day are being created. So it's essentially a reverse exponential chart. Meanwhile, the amount of dollars continues to go up, and this is also happening with currencies around the world because, and it has been, I'm not saying it's just happening right now, this is something that's been going on for decades, and really ever since we got off the gold standard, because if the US is endlessly printing money, it gives other countries the power to do the same, given that U.S. dollar is looked at as the world reserve currency. And I genuinely believe in 20 years or so, right, give or take 5 or 10, I can't say for sure, but I genuinely believe Bitcoin will be the world reserve currency, and it'll eventually be out of necessity because of just the endless irresponsible printing. So with all that, to me, it comes down to a difference in supply. There's always an X factor, right? Is there going to be another coin come out of nowhere, be more efficient? I really don't see that being the case. My personal biggest speculation, or I guess you could say worry, with Bitcoin is that quantum computing becomes so advanced over the next decade that it's able to crack the blockchain, which I don't think that's the case, because from how I understand it, it's the more Bitcoin you mine, the miners will adapt as there's more as the quantum computing power increases, because basically it's like competition within the network. I don't think I'm exactly explaining that right, so please do more research on that. Don't blindly listen to what I'm saying here, but that's the biggest general risk I see of quantum computing and just extreme artificial intelligence to some extent is a risk factor, but again, I just don't see that being the case. And overall, it just comes down to difference in supply of dollars to Bitcoin. So I'm happy GameStop's acquiring Bitcoin, but I'm also happy they're not going like full Michael Saylor mode and just going boom, buy, issue money, issue debt, right? Because that's a dangerous game. And I think what MicroStrategy is doing is really interesting, and it's working, and it honestly will probably continue to work. However, at the end of the day, they are in a lot of debt technically, right? Technically speaking, even though it's convertible notes, it is still technically debt, right? So there's always risk associated when you're drowning in debt. And meanwhile, they don't really have this strong business like GameStop does in terms of cash flow to the bottom line and interest income on their US dollar. So I feel like GameStop could use, what they raise from convertible note offerings and maybe what they get in net income or positive free cash flow to also add to it, right? So these are just some different ideas bouncing around in my head right now, but let's hit the chat. I see a couple people throwing some stuff in there. So thank you for sharing. We'll keep an eye on Circle after the sale period for initial stockholders. Could be a dip to buy. And so listen, it could be, but again, you got to keep in mind that risk, so to speak, of not risk, but their business is very heavily tied to interest rates for the time being. Any idea of if or when Ryan will offer more shares? This seems to be a strategy that have been working quite well for GME. So John, I honestly think until they spend that full $1.5 billion, they're not going to either issue shares or convertible debt unless they spend that full 1.5. The only exception I see is if they see an opportunity that they want to pounce on in the near future, so they want to raise more capital. But again, that's just what I think. I think it's always a possibility, but I don't really see them coming out with news tomorrow afternoon after the report or upon releasing the report of issuing shares or more convertible notes. But if they do, it is what it is, right? And then they have just more cash to work with. They just continue to build up the balance sheet, but we'll have to see. I don't expect they will do more share offering now. The stock price isn't really pumping and they have enough cash. Exactly, Anton. Agreed. If they do run up back here, right, high 40s, 50s, I could see them issuing shares. That might be a different situation. If we float back up to the 40s, and again, unless they spent that full 1.3, I still have to get clarity on this. I'm pretty sure they upsized the offering, if I'm not mistaken. Someone please let me know if you know for sure. But didn't they get the upsized offering, that extra $200 million, because the bond buyers exercises the right to do so, if I'm not mistaken? But either way, they still have extra cash to use. Bitcoin is being pumped by Michael Saylor, and Bitcoin is a Ponzi which doesn't give added value. If more money will be made by crypto, so why develop drugs to cure cancer? Can't even read your name. Interesting comment there. I understand the idea of like Michael Saylor just pumping it up, but I think it really just comes down to the supply and the functionality. And he's just one individual who's like, I'm going to be the absolute biggest bull there is. And at the end of the day, like, there's nothing anyone could really do about that. And as long as people are willing to give him money, institutions are going to give him money, he's going to buy Bitcoin. And he's kind of just made that abundantly clear. Share offering indeed raise the floor for the share price and build a good base for that cash. Exactly, Anton. And also essentially hedges them against, a market crash, because I see a situation where if their cash and Bitcoin combined per share, is actually, let's say it works out to be $15 a share, and then in a market crash, stock price goes down to 15, insiders can buy shares and they can theoretically then go buy back shares, basically at a 1-to-1 ratio, right? Those are just some different thoughts I have. But honestly, guys, I think I'm going to wrap it up here for today because I want to save my energy for tomorrow. Get ready, get dialed in. It's going to be an exciting report. We got to look for the Bitcoin. We got to look at, is there an operating profit? What's the net profit look like? I'd be very genuinely surprised if they show a net loss on the report, unless something unforeseen happens. And then also we'll see what the interest income's looking like, although that, might kind of change in this quarter. Although this quarter that was being reported on, Q1 is for February, March, April. So we're in Q2 right now, which is May, June, July. So interest rates still haven't been cut yet. So whatever they earn in interest income this the quarter that we're about to get the information for, it could be even higher looking ahead to Q2, right? So kind of just something to keep in mind. And they could just keep stacking and essentially raising the floor price, maintaining and delivering shareholder value. And maybe even one day, right, down the line, they start to do dividends. I don't see why they would do that now. They still got to really just decide how they want to go about things in terms of, are they going to continue to acquire Bitcoin and other assets? Are they also going to expand the business in some other fashion? And I was kind of saying this the other day too, but that's really where the opportunity lies for GameStop and investors, is that it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know what they're going to do, but they have all this cash. If you are acquiring shares, you believe in their future, then that's where the upside will come. But then the people who don't want to acquire shares, like, well, I don't know what they're going to do, right? So the I don't know what they're going to do factor, I guess you could call it, is really what gives the upside opportunity, because you're in it before whatever big things happen, right? Whether it be just Bitcoin, other acquisitions, expanding to a new segment of business, really going further into the card business. I have a feeling that's something they're going to do in some fashion. But again, I don't think we're going to get any specific information on that this quarter. They're like, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing, keep chipping away, grinding away, educating on opportunities, and then pounce when the time's right. And that's where I'm at right now. I feel pretty good going to earnings, and I'm not concerned with the short-term price action. I only have one put I sold that's outstanding right now. That is for expiring June 16th, right? So next week. I think it's the June monthly one, but it's a $28 put. I have good faith it'll stay above that if necessary. I don't mind rolling it because I think it'll climb back to 28. I am keeping some cash on the sidelines just because, again, I have a feeling that if they don't show that they acquired more Bitcoin, the market's going to say, oh, sell off. Even if EPS is great, revenue's better than expected, SG&A is significantly lower, they get a nice one-time gain from the Canadian operations. I just have this feeling that if they don't show they bought more Bitcoin, the stock price will go down. And again, I'm not saying like, oh, I want it to go down. I hope I'm wrong. But I just feel like that's the state of the stock market as a whole we're in right now, where any company buying Bitcoin, it's like, buy more, right? And especially GameStop. All right, it's just classic GameStop. They're being criticized like, oh, they didn't buy enough. Meanwhile, it's like, wait a minute. 500 million worth of Bitcoin, or 4,800 Bitcoin, whatever it was, that's quite a lot of Bitcoin. And that initial buy already made them like the 12th largest company, or the company with the 12th most amount of Bitcoin on their balance sheet in the world, right? That's pretty good for an initial buy. And the fact they still have billions in cash earning interest for the time being. So we'll see what happens. But again, appreciate you guys being here. We'll be live again tomorrow. So hope to see you there. We'll see what the numbers are. We'll see what happens. I'm going to have some official predictions tomorrow because, again, I've got a lot of different ideas bouncing around in my skull going into this remote earnings report. So we're just going to have to see. We'll see, right? And I'll come out with some predictions tomorrow. But again, just remember, I'm just a guy on the internet. Always do your own research, due diligence, double check things they say. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm always going to do my absolute best to be as accurate as possible all the time. But the reality of it is I'll misspeak here or there, make a small error. So feel free to let me know. And I'm always trying to improve myself. But remember, whether it's myself or anyone else you're watching on YouTube or on the internet, people make mistakes. Always do your own due diligence or research. That's something I'll be doing due diligence and research over the next week after the earnings report comes out, and do all the streaming tomorrow. Then take it easy, rest up tomorrow night. Later this week, I really want to look into this accounting rule, how it's going to affect how the reporting of Bitcoin is taking place going forward. This is a massive change. So continue to study that. And yeah, thanks for being here. See you. Have a nice evening. Anton, take care, my friend. Take care. Hope you have a great night as well. And yeah, can't stop, won't stop, GameStop. That's what they say, right? See you later.